Good evening, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to DolphinsTalk.com daily. On this Wednesday, June 16th, we have a special show for you today as we are joined by Clay Ferraro, WPLG, ABC 10 South Florida. Clay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
I am doing outstanding. And, of course, Ian Berger, my co-host, as always. First, let's get through it. First off, I want to thank everyone for watching over at FinHeaven.com and also the Facebook page. I am a Miami Dolphins fan. Starting next week, Ian, we're going to have a contest each week where we give away some unique and original Miami Dolphins artwork thanks to Carlos Hernandez from the I Am a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page. So, folks, be on the lookout for that. More details coming soon. It's been a busy week of news for the Dolphins. And Clay, let's first get your thoughts on the Jerome Baker contract extension. 3 years, $39 million, 28.4 guaranteed. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, it shows you the importance of Baker to that locker room, not just on the field, but what he brings to the locker room. And Brian Flores says it over and over again about the type of person that they want as players on this team, guys that just they love the game of football and they bring the right attitude every day. And so I think it's one of those things where I think you always wonder when a new regime comes in, how many of the old players will fit not just the on-field style of what the new coach and the new regime brings, but also the mentality and everything else that goes along with it. And clearly, I think it's Jerome Baker has been a big part of what Brian Flores wants this team to be all about. What I found interesting was, he was captain a couple of years ago, was not last year. 3 years ago, then was not. Getting the years mixed up now, but basically, he wasn't a captain last year, but clearly they value him as a person and a leader, despite that. And so, wouldn't surprise me one bit if that changes moving forward in the future. Now that he's going to be here long term, so great for him. He's somebody who's always great for us to talk to. In addition to all the good stuff that he does on the field as well. So I think it's great for him. I think it's great for the Dolphins. And I think it's a testament that not just, a lot of times I think we've seen this with Dolphins regimes in the past, that sometimes you fall in love with the players that you drafted and maybe you will stick with them because you see something that nobody else does and it doesn't always work out. And in this case, it's the exact opposite. You have a regime change and new group comes in and sees, yeah, man, this guy is somebody that you want to be a part of your future, not just on the field, but off of it.
Yeah. And two things real quick before I go to Ian. I think with Jerome, he's one of those guys who can play both the inside and the outside. With Flores, he's so versatile in what they do. Sometimes they're a 3-4, sometimes they're a 4-3. Baker, that makes him invaluable, how he has sort of that flexibility to play either inside or outside. 7 sacks last year. I don't think a lot of people even realize he did sack the quarterback 7 times last year, which is a lot for a linebacker. And also, the one thing which is kind of funny is when he met with the media on Friday, he was like, no, I haven't had any talks with Dolphins about a contract extension. Nothing at all. Every outlet reported it. Next thing you know, Sunday morning, Jerome Baker, he played it close to the vest. That's why the Dolphins probably love him. He let nothing out. Played it close to the vest.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Pretty much lied through his teeth, and he got in. He knew they were close on Friday because that was the first question he was asked when he joined that media session, which I know you're on, Clay. Those. But yeah, he just said, nope, not signing. Nope, we're not. Haven't spoken about a thing. Then less than 48 hours later, has a deal. Ian, what were your thoughts?
No, I'm just going to echo what you both said. The fact that he is so versatile, that is a key, I think, in Coach Flores's roster right now. He wants guys that are going to go not just play one position or not just stand one place on the field. They're going to be doing everything. And the one thing that I continue to think of whenever we mention his name is the game against the Kansas City Chiefs, right? When Baker, had that 30 some odd yard sack of Mahomes, and Mahomes is not a slow runner either. He's very fast. He's very quick, but Jerome is faster, obviously. And he was able to track him down. And I think, some people look at it and say he got overpaid, but I think too, when you can solidify that position, that linebacker spot for a good couple of years, and you've got some talent, you don't have to worry about it for a while. You start building around him on the linebacker side. We got Van Ginkel back there. We're starting to build that defense so that we can have some guys for a while, not just for 1 or 2 years at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought the interesting thing, Clay, was Miami has a few guys up for an extension sort of this offseason as they enter the final year of their deals. The first one to get it was Jerome Baker and not Mike Gesicki. Did you find that curious? I mean, Mike might have one in a week for all we know. He could have one by the time some people are listening to this. They just might be waiting to announce it or just might be working things out. Who knows? But until it happens, this could go into the season or possibly into next offseason. Did you find that interesting?
A little bit. I also think a lot of times these things have so many different variables involved. Drew Rosenhaus is a phenomenal agent, and so that he knows what the market would be like for Jerome Baker if he were to make it through this year healthy and gets to next. So, he may be going to Jerome and saying, look, this is what they're willing to offer you. Or conversely, Jerome could have gone to Drew and said, look, I don't care what it's going to be. Like, just get me what you think the best offer is going to be, and I want this thing done. And we're probably never going to know the details.
No, you never. Yeah, exactly.
So and I know we're going to talk about the Xavien Howard situation in just a little bit, but like I don't get too worked up over the order in which these things happen. I don't get too worked up over contract stuff in May, June, even early to mid-July. I always start to, the only time I start to get a little uneasy is when you get into training camp. And it's not even because you're concerned that a player isn't going to show up. It's more that, hey, you don't want somebody coming in there and pulling a hamstring because, they haven't, they're trying to go full go the second they go out there. So, anyway, to go back to your original point, your original question about was I a little surprised that it was Jerome first? No, I think it could have been any one of the players that were going into the final year. And I think so much of this stuff is predicated on what does the player want? How flexible is the player willing to be? And how flexible is the team, the front office willing to be? And sometimes, somebody like Gesicki may be looking at this and saying, hey, you know what? I feel like I can prove my value even more, now that I'm going to be, I got speedy guys alongside of me and I'm going to have more room to operate in the middle of the field. Like you don't know what the thinking is going to be in the heads of the players and things like that. So, I thought it was more, it's just one of those things where there's so many elements involved that it's too hard to know.
Yeah, we'll never know. And I think you're right. Because if he has a big year at tight end this year, which he very well might, because he's improved each year since he got into the league. And he was great last year, and he was good 2 years ago. He was great last year. If he has a big year this year, he might want to hit the market as a free agent or put Miami in a spot where they have to use the franchise tag on him as well and break the bank.
Not to interrupt you, I apologize.
No,
but he was doing all that with
one arm.
What was outside of him? And I think it was really easy for defenses to kind of key in on him at times. Especially when Devontae Parker was playing hurt. You give Parker credit for trying to play through stuff, but there were so many times where Gesicki was potentially the scariest pass catcher on the field in many ways, and so because of injuries to other guys, and so I think now, hey, you got room to operate middle of the field. All of a sudden, you see more separation and what he can do when he's got more, maybe slower linebackers, safeties on him. So you just don't know. And like you said, by the time this posts, we could find out that they've got a deal in place, just like what happened with Baker last week.
Absolutely.
One thing that we don't talk about, and I think it partly could be because of Minka was the first pick in that draft, but that draft in 2018 that include Minka, Gesicki, Jerome Baker, Durham Smythe, who's still with us, Jason Sanders, who just made it to the Pro Bowl. Mm-hmm. These guys, that draft is probably one of the best drafts we've seen in 5-10 years at least, if not more. So it's amazing. Now, obviously, had Minka still been with the team, then we'd be kind of benefiting that way. But without him there, we still got some additional draft picks that continue to follow up, not just with Minka, but the other draft trade that we got from Texas. So
what's funny about that draft is they had Minka and Rosen, who both went like top 10 in round one. They were here for a cup of coffee, and everyone else is doing great. So the picks early in round one, nothing came from them. The ones from later are doing outstanding. So yeah, that's funny about the 2018 draft. You're right. That's probably one of the better drafts they've had in a long, long time. Now, next topic, and I'll start with you, Ian, on this one. Xavien Howard's not showing up to mandatory minicamp. I don't think it's a real surprise. I think many fans really kind of expected this because right after that loss, week 17 at the end of the year to the Bills, his agent was already out there saying we want to get paid. And I mean, there's talk about a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of layers here. So I guess, Ian, let's get your thoughts first on Xavien Howard holding out as of right now.
So I think this is a very sensitive subject because
well, it is for Xavien.
Right, exactly. And it's sensitive for a lot of Miami Dolphins fans because you have a whole group of fans that want him to get paid no matter what. And then you've got a whole group of fans that say he just re-signed a contract while he was injured over a year ago, and he's got a couple of years left, and trying to restructure a contract is unprecedented by this point. But I will tell you, after I've thought about this, and I have to give Armando Salguero a little credit, even though I don't always see eye to eye with what he has to say. He mentioned it this morning. He said, when you're talking about precedents on teams, and people are worried that if we decide to move some money into the guaranteed pot for him and, bring him into training camp, then people would be worried that we'd be setting a precedent if somebody has a good season. But he went on to say, how many players do we have on a team that are the absolute best in their position in the National Football League? That doesn't happen very often. So being able to set a precedent would be based on where you rank in your position to the National Football League. So
that's a great point. That's a great point.
And I stole it from Armando because I wasn't thinking that until he mentioned it this morning, because I was on the wagon of, well, we don't want to set a precedent. We don't want to say, hey, if you have a good season, you're going to ask for more on your contract. And that's not the case with this situation. And I think if it's only a couple of $1 million and ultimately he wants to be paid more than Byron Jones in the guaranteed side, the Dolphins can get creative for next year where the cap is going to be going up, or the year after that where you'll have some more cap room as well. Ultimately, my opinion, which I think is shared with the majority of Miami Dolphins fans, is I want to see him on the team. I mean, we have built a really strong defense, and I really don't want to worry about, trading him for draft picks. And then what are we going to get next year or the year after that, with those draft picks? With X, we know what we got. We know he's been, Pro Bowl player. He's been a little injury prone, but last year he proved that he can make some really incredible plays and still stay healthy at the same time. So I want to see him stay on. And honestly, my opinion, and I'm just going with my gut, I think it gets taken care of right before training camp, and I think that he's going to go in. So that's my opinion.
Clay?
Yeah, I could see that as well. And I hadn't read Armando's column, but that's I agree with that because if you're setting the precedent, but then okay, somebody shows up at camp and wants to do the same thing, and it's like, okay, well, show me how many interceptions you had this year, or show me how many touchdown catches you had if it's a receiver. Show me how many rushing touchdowns you had. So, you can say you're setting a precedent, but yeah, if you're setting the precedent that the player who has the best season that season at his position among every player at his position in the league, if that sets a precedent that you restructure the deal, then that's a good problem to have. The other thing that I've learned over time, I don't believe this idea that the salary cap is a myth and that it doesn't exist and all that. What I do believe is that there are a lot of ways around it, especially for players that you value. And you don't get into trouble by restructuring, making money guaranteed for players who are going to be on your roster. Where you get into problems is when you do it for players like Ryan Tannehill and Ndamukong Suh and Rashad Jones a few years ago. And with Rashad, it was more the timing of it. It was, he was going into a year where, and this was Mike Tannenbaum was basically GMing to save his job. And they were basically pushing all their chips to the front of the table, to the middle of the table, by restructuring all of these guys who knew a new regime, if it didn't work that year, those guys were going to be gone. So they were setting the Dolphins up to be in a bad salary cap position in 2019 if it didn't work out. And it didn't. that doesn't apply when you have players who are just coming off the type of season like Xavien Howard is. And so I think, and this is, you guys know me, I was born in Louisiana. And so I follow, in addition to the Dolphins, I follow the Saints really closely. And, people every year, it's, the Saints are in salary cap, what? They're not going to get out of it. Well, no, it's because they put mechanisms in place for the players who they value, your Michael Thomases, your Alvin Kamara's, your Cameron Jordans, to where you can move stuff around and basically use their contracts as credit cards. Xavien Howard's the type of player that you want to use his contract as a credit card. Those are the types of players that you want to be able to be flexible with. You don't, and I know Tannehill's proven it, in Tennessee, that in the right system with the right, and we could have a whole other pod on that.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, I think it was pretty clear that he was going to need a different situation than what was here with Adam Gase, and so so I think it's different when you're doing that with a player like Xavien Howard. So getting back to the original question, the original point, he's the type of player you set a precedent for. He's the type of player that you kind of use the contract as a credit card, and you give him a little bit more in the guaranteed side if that's what it takes to get done, and salary cap, you figure that out later.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on this, but there's sort of a Lee Corso not so fast. And that is, we are just assuming Howard just wants a little bit more money, wants to be paid probably the same as Jones or a little more than Jones. If Howard comes in saying, I want to be the highest paid cornerback in the league, then we have to put on the brakes here, because that's a whole different conversation. So we don't know what Xavien's asking for. We're under the assumption he wants a little bit more, just sort of be equal with Jones, which that's fine. We can make that happen, like you said, with the salary cap increasing and sliding around some money, make some money that's not, and just all the small things that you can do to make that happen. But if he wants to be, and if he wants a significant raise, that's a whole different conversation where Miami might have to pump the brakes on it and go, we just can't do that. So I don't know. I mean, once again, by the time this drops, this could all be resolved. It could be resolved in 10 minutes, or this could go into August for all we know. Who knows? But I think that's the big conversation here. What does Xavien want? Right now, none of us know.
Right.
And if he wants to be the highest paid guy in the league, if he's got those kind of eyes, I think Miami seriously has to consider not making that happen, because Howard has had some knee issues over the years. A little bit more money, that's fine. He earned it last year. It was a great year. I get it. But if he wants that, there might be an overreach for this front office to be like, we drafted Noah Igbunagani in round 1 because we didn't trust your knee. And now you're going to make noise after one good year? That becomes tough to swallow if he wants that much more money. If it's a little more, okay. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think your point, the Igbunagani pick gives him some flexibility. It gives him a little bit of leverage. Yes. There are levels to everything. And yeah, I think Ian and I are operating on the same assumption as far as
a little bit more money.
A little bit more. Yeah. I don't – there are levels that I don't think you want to go to because of that have nothing to do with what he's able to do when he's on the field. It's the questions about whether or not he can stay on the field and whether the knees are going to be an issue moving forward. And so, I agree with you completely. And I think operating under that assumption, I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes interesting. Ian?
And I heard a conspiracy theory I just want to share with you guys that Tua threw 5 interceptions yesterday because Coach Flores told him he needed to throw some interceptions to get let Xavien Howard know, hey, we got some good defenders back there that can intercept the ball. So, hey, I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Ian, I got to tell you, man, I know what our next topic is. And you're a pro, dude. That's a transition. That's beautiful.
Transition.
Oh, look at that.
That's a pro transition right there.
A lot of people tell me I'm in showbiz, but I don't believe them. I do this podcast once a week, man.
Yeah, these podcasts are rough. So I guess that leads to our next topic, which was, on Wednesday and Tuesday, in the middle of a rainstorm, Tua Tagovailoa threw 5 interceptions. So the Miami Dolphins season ended on June 15th, which, as the players were wearing shorts outside in a rainstorm. I mean, I always say this, and I've been saying it for years on this podcast for those longtime listeners. OTAs and mini camps, it's fun. It's fun to follow. It's fun to watch. At the end of the day, it means absolutely. Clay, you probably know this. You've been down there for how many years did we hear Isaiah Ford is unbelievable in like May and June, tearing it up. All the Isaiah Ford this, Isaiah Ford that. The second they put on pads in August, you never heard Isaiah Ford's name again. And that it's like whatever happens this time of year when the guys are in shorts and they're working on stuff, it means next to nothing. And I even saw some members of the national media sort of laughing at Dolphins fans online, saying the overreaction to this stuff is like comical because some fans were just losing their mind and trying to come to conclusions based off one practice in June. Clay, what was your take on Tua day one having a meltdown and having a bad day?
So what's funny was my wife and I was actually the last day of my vacation. My wife and I were in the Keys. We were celebrating our anniversary. And, so we're coming back and I'm getting like all these notifications on my phone. I'm like, and I see things about Tua throwing interception. I'm like, so
is it September? Is it October? What is this? Yeah. Right.
Was there a re-injury? Like, what am I seriously? And then, and let me give you a little bit of context here too. Before I came here, I was in Fort Myers, and the big thing over in Fort Myers was spring training baseball. And I'm not sure if it was Josh Beckett, but I think it may have been. But I remember distinctly when he was pitching for the Red Sox, and I think it was him, he had one outing where he just got absolutely destroyed in spring training. And I think it may have been back-to-back outings. And come to find out later, he was working on a brand new pitch. And what you learned later on was whether it was a different grip on a slider or something completely different, he was throwing it up there and seeing if he could locate it, and he couldn't. And he decided not to use the pitch. And so I think what was really interesting was there was the freak out over the 5 interceptions, but then it was somehow completely ignored that Tua was asked directly about it afterward. He said, "Oh yeah, we were going out there and this was a day where we were trying to be aggressive. That was part of the game plan today for practice was we were trying to just chuck it in there, cram it into holes and see if guys could catch it, see if we could squeeze it in there, especially in the weather, and see what would happen." It's like everybody ignored him saying that. And then Brian Flores this morning said, yeah, you don't know if you can kick a 60-plus yard field goal until you go out there and practice and you try it. You're not going to try it for the first time in a game. As a coach, I want to see what a blitz looks like in practice and how it affects the quarterback in practice and how we can run it in practice before I see how it works in a game. And the thing that I found just hilarious was you spent all last year hearing people criticize Tua about not being aggressive enough. And you have one practice where the goal is to be overly aggressive and try to cram it in the hole. And now we're blistering him for that? So I feel like, and without looking at the usernames on Twitter and seeing exactly who was saying what, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if the exact same people who were complaining about Tua being too passive and not aggressive enough were complaining about him throwing 5 interceptions in a rainstorm, a torrential downpour, when the game plan was for him to try to cram the ball into tight spaces.
Oh, you just made
they're
a
not
point
saying anything
tonight.
Today. And they're not saying anything today after him having a good day, by the way, too.
Yeah, so I wasn't out there Tuesday. I was out there today. I was out there on Wednesday, and he looked great. And we were able to see it was a 7-on-7 because when they did team, by then it was pouring again. They decided to do that inside the practice bubble, and there were some ups and downs in the practice bubble, but it was clearly a more representative performance by him of what I think you would expect. So to me, guys, and this is my ultimate take on it, I loved the philosophy. First day of minicamp, go out there and be overly aggressive, make some mistakes, get used to throwing it out there, get comfortable. Don't get comfortable throwing interceptions. Get comfortable figuring out where you can take educated risks, where you can take risks and feel good about them. So I thought it was more a good thing than a bad thing. That was just me.
Ian?
No, same, and yesterday it really did feel like the ceiling was falling down. And I think that there's entire group of Dolphins fans, and they are Dolphins fans, I think, that have already decided that Tua is not going to be the guy. And when they see a day where he has thrown 5 interceptions, it can help kind of feed what they have been saying. And they almost get that, well, I'm right, look how bad he is, right? And then you just kind of have to keep reminding people, hey, this is practice. It's the first day of minicamp practice in June. You can't take a lot from it. And I even mentioned it yesterday, and I retweeted it out a little while ago. I said yesterday, when he has a good practice tomorrow, all is going to be forgotten. And what does he do? He goes out and has a pretty solid practice today. I know that first part, while he was outside, he was slinging it and he was hitting every receiver. The fact is, he made 0 interceptions today, which I think was also important because he was able to do things a little differently today. And even then, some people are like, oh, well, he had 5 touchdowns because they were doing red zone drills, so you're going to get a few more touchdowns. But they don't mention, and I wrote it down because I want to say, they didn't mention the 50-yard reception that he threw to Jalen Waddle while in the bubble. They didn't mention the 30-yard touchdown that he threw to Devontae Parker while they were in the bubble. They pick kind of what helps them with, with what they're trying to say. But I said it today again, and I said, listen, it doesn't mean anything. It makes me feel better. I think I had a much better afternoon today than I had yesterday, because he had a better day out there. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean much. Talk to me in 88 days when the Miami Dolphins are playing the New England Patriots in New England. And let's talk then about how he's playing.
2021, that's what matters. Because here's what I take from this. And, some fans want to have it both ways, where if he plays quote unquote bad in practice, well, it's just practice. But if he plays good, C is good. No, practice doesn't matter. When it comes to this, all of August doesn't matter. Preseason games don't matter. None of it matters. He can look horrible all summer. September 12th, if he shows up and plays lights out, he's fine. That's all anybody cares about. And I think the one thing the past, I would say 24 hours is I already knew this, kind of cemented it though. The microscope he's under, I've never seen anything like this before. This kid can't have a bad day in June without national media people. Rich Eisen today did like a 20-minute segment with Jeff Darlington on this. That's Rich Eisen. That's a big show. Did 20 minutes with Jeff Darlington talking about Tua's bad day in practice in June. I mean, the microscope and pressure he's under, I don't know if the pressure, I think there's a chance the pressure could crush this kid. And I know all starting quarterbacks are under pressure. It's a high-profile position in the most popular sport in America. I get it. But the pressure in the microscope he's under, holy cow. I mean, I've never seen nothing like it, Clay. I mean, this is new level stuff.
And you're right, it could. And yet the reverse is also true. The fact that he's going through it early and that he went through it at Alabama. And I think it can go both ways. And I think the fact that he's going through it so early in his career, if he's able to get to the other side of this thing and improve. I'm not talking about go out there and be an all-pro this year. I'm not talking about go out and lead the Dolphins to a Lombardi this season, but go out and lead them to the playoffs and look like a quarterback that you can win games because of instead of just win games with. Then he's on the other side of this thing. And I think he can look back at all the criticism and any future criticism, he can let just roll off his back. So, and my gut tells me just from, we haven't been able to physically be around these guys outside of just reading their body language at practices and during games. So this just comes from seeing how his teammates respond to him and how he is during the Zoom sessions and things like that. My gut tells me that he's going to be just fine with the criticism. That if he fails as a quarterback, it's not going to be because the criticism gets to him and crushes him. But you're right, it could. And that's, I like that it's happening this early in his career. But I think because I think it's going to get him to the other side. The thing I do like is, and by the way, let me add one more thing to that. I think if Justin Herbert had been taken earlier, then I don't think the pressure on Tua would be nearly as great,
That's a big part of
because
it. It's a big part of it.
Sure.
fair or not, and I think Herbert is ridiculously talented. I think he has been for a while. I still want to see who he is as a quarterback on a winning team, and does a lot of this stuff when he can't throw caution to the wind, and when he can't just kind of putting up numbers. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but it's easier when you're trying to come from behind, and interceptions are what they are. I feel like Tua this past year was in many ways put in the spot of a game manager. Part of that was because he admitted he didn't know the playbook as well. Part of it was because they had a fantastic defense, and you wanted your quarterback to be able to protect the football. So I think if you didn't see Justin Herbert putting up these video game type numbers, I don't think it would be as bad. But it is what it is, and that's Tua's going to have to live with that. But if we're looking back at this thing in 20 years, and Tua's got a couple of Lombardis, and Justin Herbert has all the passing records, although that won't happen because he's in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes. But if he's the one who has the superior numbers, but Tua's winning, I think Dolphins fans would take that 100 times out of 100.
And that's sort of like the 2004 draft when you had Rivers, Eli, and Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger won once or twice, whatever. Rivers had this amazing stats, all the numbers, never won. Eli, little old Eli, has got the 2 iconic Super Bowl wins, doesn't have the best numbers, walking out there with a shoulder shrug. He's the one with the Lombardi trophy that. So it kind of reminds me of that, although Eli was picked first in that draft, wasn't he? Yeah, he was picked first in that draft. But it's sort of like 3 quarterbacks go near the top of the draft, and, 2 of them have all the fancy stats and everything, and then little old Eli didn't really put up huge numbers, but he won Lombardis. And that's really all it comes down to.
I'll take that all day long, man. I don't need numbers. Give me the Super Bowl.
No, so it does remind me of that, but really at the end of the day, this does come down to September. Nothing that happens in any practice between now and September 12th really matters. Now, if he has a bad game September 12th, September 13th is going to be chaos. Miami Dolphins fans, it's going to be how quick do we go to Jacoby Brissett? That's going to be the question heading into week 2, and that's just the world we're in, unfortunately. But Tua, I think he's going to be fine. And if he's not fine, it's not the end of the world. You just suck it up, play this year out, and look for something in 2022, because that's how this league works. Clay,
you've heard me say that, Mike. You've heard me say that a bunch of times, that for everything we saw with Tua last season, that was really not a fair indicator of what we should expect from him in the future. So I said, especially for those folks that don't truly believe that Tua is the right guy, let's see what happens this season. Give him the full year, right? He's now got the preseason. He's going to have preseason games. He's got the mini camp. He's got the training camp. He's going to go through all these things that he's never, and the weapons, the wide receiver. Exactly. A healthy wide receiver core, which is going to be great. He's still got Gesicki. He's got a new tight end as well. So there's all these things that he didn't really have last season. If he doesn't work out, well, guess what? You've still built the rest of the team around the quarterback spot. So if we have to go get a quarterback, it's not the end of the world. It's not what we want to do, but you've built the team to say, all we got to do is find the right passer, right? If Tua is not that person. So that's why I'm not overreacting to a lot of what happens. And I really want to see him. I want to see him be successful this coming year. And I think he will be successful, because he also is not looking over his shoulder thinking that Fitzpatrick may end up coming in for him.
That's a big help.
And I do not foresee Brissett coming in unless Tua is hurt for one reason or another. So, one other thing too, and I know you were going to ask Clay another question, but the other thing that they didn't really work on these last 2 days is the run game, right? So you've got all these new running backs.
Well,
there's an opportunity.
Shorts, yeah.
And Gaskins, when he's healthy, the kid puts up numbers, right? And he was on his way for, I think, what was it, 1,100 yards, 1,200 yards had he not gotten COVID. And the other thing we're not talking about is the defense. I mean, you mentioned Igbinoghene a little earlier. His name was mentioned over the last 2 days of doing some nice things on the field. Again, they're not on full pads, right? You've got a lot of variables where it's not a true full practice, but still, it was nice to see those guys. It was nice to hear Nick Needham's name get mentioned again yesterday, for a pick and doing some other positive things. So we've built a positive team, a good team. So you don't just have to look at one specific position and say, we're going to have a crappy season or we're not going to have a crappy season. You got to look at the big picture.
When it comes to quarterback, like I always say, the people who don't like him, there's, the people who don't like him, he could throw 4 touchdowns and they'll say he should have had 5. That one pass he messed up in the second quarter, he should have had 5. The people who love him, you could say he's the best quarterback on planet Earth. They'll say, what, he sucks on Mars? I mean, there's no compliment good enough. There's no dig that's bad. Everyone's in their camp. Everyone's sort of picked sides, and that's just the world we're in, and nothing going to change it. So,
this is what was funny was I've been on both sides. I've felt the wrath of both sides of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I was, and look, this was before all the allegations against Deshaun Watson, and obviously, we have to wait and let that situation play out. But way back before that, I was of the mindset that, look, if you can get a Deshaun Watson, or let's use Russell Wilson, since an established all-pro, all-world quarterback. Yeah. I love Tua. I think Tua could be great. I think he will be great. But I know Russell Wilson is great. Like, I know that guy is a star. And so at the most important position in the sport. And so I felt the wrath of the people who, like you were saying, like you can't say anything that can remotely be viewed as negative. Yep. Because I said, look, I think he's going to be really good. I know those guys are good. And I think, like Ian just said, you built the foundation. Like, if you were to put Russell Wilson on this team right now, I mean, this team has as good of a chance of anybody outside of Kansas City of making it to the big game. And so I felt the wrath of both sides of this thing, and I think you can. The truth is in the middle, and yet that doesn't sell. And you can at the same time make everybody mad, but also be enough in the middle that I think
on social media, no one wants to hear any type of nuance.
No,
it's either black or white. There's no nuance. There's no deep thought. People are just, which is why I always say social media is so toxic. It's just black or white. You can't have a nuanced thought where it's like, and I said back in like February, January, when the whole thing was starting to come out with Watson before the allegations, he might be on the block, he might want to leave, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a win-win for Miami. Either they have the guy they have now and they have all these picks to put people around him and they're going to have a young quarterback who's good, or you have a top 3 or top 5 quarterback in the league. There's, a can't win. And then, of course, half the people are sending me tweets. You hate Tua. No, did I just say that? No, I made a nuanced point that they're good either way. And there's no nuance. If you even mention Watson's name or Rodgers' name or Wilson's, you get people in pitchforks coming at you. It's like, good Lord. We had on Omar Kelly, 2 weeks ago or so, maybe 3, and I said, Omar, I don't know how you do it on social media. I got 20,000 followers. You got like 70,000. I don't know how you do it, because people are just incensed when it's not even a sentence or an opinion. You post a name, people get triggered. Almost like politics. You put up like the wall, people get triggered. You put up, this, people just get triggered. They don't even read what's around it. They just get triggered by names and sentences, and they just start their rhetoric.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I don't. I used to try to respond to everybody that I could on Twitter, and
I gave up.
It's got no. As sad as it sounds, a lot of people don't really see. They'll say things that aren't to generate discussion. They'll say things just to scream and yell, and either try to make you look dumb or whatever, and it's just not worth it. But
see, I got you. See,
yeah, I will say, if somebody genuinely has a fair response or is respectful, I try to engage, because that's the rarity now. That's the exception rather than the rule. But yeah, that's what it's become, and I think it all goes back to your original point about Tua. The truth that Tua Tagovailoa is in the middle right now. You can look at him and say, man, I really think this guy could be a good quarterback, but I really think he needs to be a little more aggressive. I really think that he needs to take advantage of the weapons that they now have that they did not have last year. And until you see that, it's fair to be skeptical. It's fair to say we haven't seen it on the pro level yet, and we haven't seen. He says his hip is healthy, and I hope he's right. Until we see him perform in the NFL at a Super Bowl winning quarterback's level, it's fair to be skeptical, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean you hate Tua. And by saying that you think he could be that guy, that doesn't mean that you're a Tua or nothing guy. It's, there's nuance, and nobody wants to talk about that.
No.
I think so from a Fins fan perspective, I think people are, especially with think of the Miami Dolphins fan base. I think they're just so exhausted of trying to find quarterbacks, trying to find the right quarterback, and now we've got Tua, who, had a really terrific college career until he got hurt. And now he's our quarterback. And I think we're just tired of having to come to his defense, and it's not even come to his defense, but just kind of block out some of that other noise, because even this morning I saw a tweet and I didn't retweet, I didn't comment, I didn't, but it was now that Tua threw 5 interceptions, are you, if Deshaun fixes his legal battles, would you prefer Deshaun over Tua? And I was like, why do we need to talk about that right now? And that's the exhaustion. And I think a lot of Miami Dolphins fans feel that. And I think that's why they do defend him so much, because they're like, give the kid a chance. We are done trying to jump quarterback over quarterback over quarterback. We just want to see if this kid has it or not, but let's give him a chance first.
Yeah. And I put it this way, wherever you stood on Tua before yesterday's practice, you can't let what happened yesterday change your opinion regardless. Like if they're
going to trade for Watson, June 15th didn't change anything. Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And again, it's hard to bring up that situation because there's so much other stuff involved. So I think if you're keeping it with Tua, it was a training camp, it was a mini camp practice where they said to go out there and try to cram the ball in there. Like this isn't hard. This is a pitcher. This is Nolan Ryan going out there and experimenting with the knuckleball in spring training, or all right, that's a bad example because I think you do want Tua to be a bit more aggressive, but you know what I mean. Like
yes, absolutely.
You're telling him to go to an extreme because he hasn't done that enough, and so you're trying to immerse. It's what they call it, immersion therapy, so whatever it is. Hey, get him used to doing that. Don't get him used to throwing intercept. Get him used to being aggressive. And you had that five pick day. Move on. Like it has nothing that. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. So I coached my girls' basketball leagues for 13 seasons, and when we had practices, I always challenged them to do things that they've never done before, and a lot of times by doing that, they made mistakes. And I always came back to them and said, I want you to make mistakes here, because come game time during the weekend, then you're going to already know what that feels like. You're going to know that you can't do something a certain way, because then you're going to make that mistake again. And I think you talk to any coach is going to say, that's why we do it in practices. But, again, the number 5 sticks with people. If it was 2, if it was 3, it would not have been a national story. People wouldn't have picked up on it. But because it was 5, that was what everybody went with. And if that's all you saw, and that's and you didn't read into the context and understand what was going on, I could see why someone would say, well, he completely stinks, 5 interceptions on a day of practice. He should be able to swing that ball without getting any interceptions. Or Tom Brady doesn't throw interceptions, during his practices, right? Dan Marino never threw interceptions during his practices, whatever that story is.
Right.
All right, Clay, last question for you, then we'll let you go. The most important question I'm going to ask you all night. Your Virginia Tech Hokies, what's the outlook for 2021?
Oh,
I know they say the kid get in a lot of trouble, which I won't even mention what he did or what he's being accused of. But there's
Oh, I didn't even hear about this.
I think there's a kid on the team who was just charged with murder. I'm not quite sure who.
I did hear about that. Yeah. And that was, I mean,
stuff like that.
Yeah,
it happened at any school. I know.
From an on-field perspective, again, keeping it on field, I don't know that he was expected to contribute
much.
Yeah, I may be wrong on that. But that's so second. That's nowhere close to So
that's not even the point of my question. Just
overall,
from
a football perspective, I mean, you have no clue what the quarterback situation is going to be like, and that's a problem, and that's been a problem there for a long time. And unfortunately, when you go out and you get a coach who's number one, like when you're doing the pros and the cons, the number one pro with him is his work with quarterbacks, and he hasn't been able to develop a quarterback. It's your program does what Virginia Tech's program has done, and that's go downhill. And it's and the thing, and this is it's difficult because you try to separate yourself. You try to separate your fandom a little bit, but look, at some point, fans know what's going on, and I think unfortunately you have a head coach and a coaching staff that don't really care to recruit that hard, and not that they don't work hard, but that I think there's a feeling that if we don't get the number one guy on our board, then we'll evaluate well enough to put together a good team by getting the guys that top programs don't want or that we can beat out for. And that worked at Memphis for Justin Fuente and his coaching staff. That does not work in a Power 5 conference.
No, and not at Tech, who he replaced a legendary coach, which is never an easy spot. Especially when it comes to college sports. Pro sports, a little bit easier. College sports, you never want to be the guy to replace someone who they're building statues of on campus. That's almost impossible, number one. And number two, the ACC has gotten better. Now, not at the top. It's still Clemson and everyone else, and that ain't changing anytime soon. But Wake Forest has gotten better. Boston College has gotten better. Not great, but they went from like 1 or 2 win seasons to like 6 win seasons, which that raises up everyone else. That's going to knock the teams that were sort of top middle, like Tech, down.
And let me tell you, the team that's risen, that's killed them, is North Carolina.
Yep.
North Carolina, and it's I grew up in the 757, which is it's actually I think it's closer to Chapel Hill than it is to Blacksburg. It's Norfolk, Newport News, where Michael Vick is from, and Ronald Curry, and so when I was a kid, North Carolina was the brand there. And then, as time went on, Virginia Tech started to make some waves there, largely because of Vic and his success. But Frank Beamer built on that and did a really, really good job. Justin Fuente came in, and they did not make recruiting in the state as big of a priority as they needed to. So that's a big problem. And over time, it starts to erode. And look, I will say this: I do think they're really good at evaluating talent. Caleb Farley was someone who I think he was a quarterback in high school, and they brought him in as a receiver, and then they saw how twitchy he was, and they were like, "Nah, man, you're going to be a first-round pick as a cornerback," and they switched him, and he was phenomenal. Christian Darrisaw was a 2-star recruit. I think his only offer maybe Delaware State.
He goes in the first round.
Yeah, and people were hammering. I remember. And I'm not going to pretend to be a great evaluator of talent. I can't do what these guys do. But I remember seeing Christian Darrisaw's tape, and I'm sitting there like, what am I missing here? Like, this guy is good. This guy has length. Like, what am I? And so, like, they have done a good job of finding a few of those guys, but the problem is they don't win the battles for the guys who are out there. Like, they don't win the battles for the guys who have offers from North Carolina, and they've started to lose some battles to Virginia. They've started to lose some basically any day. I want to say they finished next to last in recruiting, year before last in the ACC. I think the only team they finished ahead of was either Wake or Boston College. Like,
don't say my Syracuse.
No,
Syracuse.
no, Syracuse finished ahead of them.
I'm kidding.
Syracuse finished ahead of them. And I think that was Dino Babers. I think they had beaten Clemson. And what's the name of the quarterback who was so fun to watch?
Eric Dungy. Dungy. I think he's with the Bengals camp. I think he's in the Bengals
flew
camp.
Through the air and did a Chun-Li Street Fighter 2 kick in the chest of a Canes player or something. So, anyway, you've got me going off on a tangent now. I apologize for that.
No, you're fine.
But long story short, not great. I think the one positive moving forward is if Fuente doesn't get it done this year, the buyout drops, and they've actually got some really big things happening in the athletic department that the next coach could come in and actually work with.
So real quick too, because we've got a lot of audience members from South Florida. They'd be very upset if I didn't do one of these.
There you go.
I don't know if they have officially recruited this kid, but there's a quarterback. It was in the Miami Herald, I think today, with Barry Jackson, whose nickname is the Heartbreak Kid. Now, I don't know nothing about the kid. I don't know if he's any good or not, but any high school kid who comes into a major college program, possibly like Miami, who has a nickname, the Heartbreak Kid, I'm going to root for. That's just the greatest nickname ever after professional wrestlers. Shawn Michaels, I guess, he was a big fan of him, and that was his moniker. So the Heartbreak Kid might be coming to Hard Rock Stadium for the Hurricanes real soon, which will be fun. If he's any good, at least it'll be fun to watch.
You guys are opening up Pandora's box, by the way. We're going to talk about Louisville.
We're an ACC country.
Yeah.
With really the majority of our fan base. It's still Clemson and everyone else. Although Clemson this year might not have a good year because they are hurting at quarterback. Is their top kid, who was an all-role player, is out for the year, and I don't know if they have anyone else. I mean, they have guys obviously, but I don't know if they have anyone ready to step in at that level to sort of compete for a national championship. So, yeah, a little college football. Look, it's June. We can't talk about the Dolphins. I mean, there's only so much to talk about with guys in shorts in June. You gotta mix it up. So, Clay, thank you for your time tonight. Everyone, be sure to follow Clay Ferraro on Twitter at ClayWPLG and watch him on Channel 10 in South Florida. Ian, follow Ian Berger on Twitter at Ian693. Oh, and everyone, I forgot to do our Manscaped ad. I'll just mention it real quick. Go to manscaped.com, use the promo code Dolphins Talk, save 20%, and get free shipping. All the great Manscaped products. Father's Day is in a few days, so if you haven't got something yet, you can still buy it. You might not have it in time for Sunday, but you can let them know. Dad, we got you some.
To save Clay, we won't go through the normal. We won't go through our normal spiel. Which I think
send me live reads.
Oh, I thought you were going to say we'd have to watch you manscape.
No.
He's like, I have to go, guys.
They send me live reads, and the live reads, Clay, are so over the top. So, I mean, I've made Ian blush before reading some of these because they are little. They are little. Some of them really look. They're really funny too. I'm not saying anything bad, but they're very. Talking about how that works, whatever. So
actually, one last question, and this is for a guy's been asking for a while. He's probably asked it like 5 or 6 times. Okay. His name is Cap in the chat, and he says, "Do we know when the Hurricanes? Have we heard the Miami Hurricanes are going to get into a real stadium?"
Well, that's never going to happen.
And I think they love Hard Rock Stadium because
that's a private university with no money.
Exactly.
That's just never going to happen.
Exactly. But I figured I would ask it since he's been asking it so many times.
Howard Schnellenberger, the late Howard Schnellenberger, was a big proponent of doing a very small stadium on campus, kind of like he had built at FAU, and then maybe you hold the bigger games, like your Florida State games, your Notre Dame games, and things like that at Hard Rock. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. I do think you get to the point where, if you have those tiers of games, then, I don't, then you're kind of like saying, all right, this game is important, this game isn't. And that may be a little bit tough for a major program, but no, I don't see that happening. There's just not enough land. I mean, if you've driven on the campus at the U, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful campus, you don't really see where there would be space for a stadium that would house, a major elite college football program. So yeah, I think they like it. And let me add one more thing before we go. I remember this was 2017, and Virginia Tech and Notre Dame played at Hard Rock back to back, and this was right after they had added the canopy. And I was there for both games. I was on the field for both games. And I remember distinctly Bud Foster saying after the game, the Virginia Tech defensive coordinator, saying, that is the loudest that we have. That was the loudest environment for a Hurricanes road game, for a road game for us at Miami that we have played in I can't remember, at least since the glory days of the Orange Bowl. So I think you saw that you could turn that stadium into a weapon for the Canes in those two games, that Virginia Tech and that Notre Dame game that year. When the Canes are good, that is a real stadium. That is a real college football weapon if you're a home team. But you got to play like you were playing in 2017 and get big games there and sell it out.
65,000 fans, right? That's
the South Florida market. Because I went to a Friday night game with Tom when we were down there I think 2019 against Virginia on a Saturday night game. No, Friday night game. It was Friday night game.
I remember.
Yeah, and there was there was not a lot of people there, which that is the problem with the Hurricanes in that market is if they're good, people show up. If they're not, they won't. When you can go to Ohio State, look at 60,000 people for a spring game. It's a spring game where they're playing each other. They get 60,000. Same thing with Oklahoma. Same thing with Nebraska. Same thing with that. Miami. And plus, it's a private school. Private school needs money elsewhere, which it's tough to pay for something like that. Would be, someone very rich would have to die and just hand them the money. Otherwise, they ain't going to raise that much.
You're not wrong, and you bring up the Ohio State example. I'll say this: like I was there. Virginia Tech played Ohio State in 2014.
Was that the first game of the year or so?
Yes.
It was in September. Yeah.
Yes, it was the year that Tech beat them, and then Ohio State went on to win the national championship. And it was the only game Ohio State lost all year. They came back. I was there at the game, and I'll tell you, Hard Rock Stadium when Notre Dame and Tech were there in 2017 was far louder than the shoe was that night. That was a night game. LeBron James was at the game, was firing up the crowd. And part of it is how the stadium is built. Yeah. But no, so when people ask the question, when are the Canes going to move into a new stadium? They're into a real stadium. They're in a real stadium. And that can be a real college home field advantage, but you got to play up to that. And I think if the Canes get back there in the next couple of years, you'll see that place rocking just like
fill up, just like it was in the '80s. They'll pack the house, and every ex-player and
winning solves all
winning
problems.
Stands all. And Ian, we have the same hats. I did get my training camp hat today.
Nice,
so we
buddy.
have matching hats. So maybe
beautiful.
Matching hats
People know that I'm not a big classic logo guy. I've made that comment before, but
that's a cool hat, though.
A fresh hat.
It's a cool hat.
I figure it goes with the shirt. You got to wear the shirt that goes along.
I'm not even a white hat guy, but I like this hat. So yeah. All right, Clay. Thanks so much, everyone. Check out the website dolphinstalk.com. We have a bunch of new articles, videos, commentary, and podcasts coming up here throughout the next few days. We'll talk to everyone again next week, and everyone have a good one.
Fins up, everybody.
Take care, fellas.